Drivetime on RTE Radio 1, sponsored by Zurich. Insurance to suit your needs. Protect your home, car or van with Zurich.
Ryanair has called on the government to act immediately on the recommendations of its aviation task force in lifting the ban on quarantine restrictions on the 1st of July. However, the task force report has yet to be finalised and there's no guarantee that it will be fully approved by Cabinet. Earlier, public health expert Dr. Gabriel Kelly strongly advised against lifting quarantine controls, and he recommended that flights should take place only between countries where the virus is under control.
No, we need to keep up the barriers at the moment. And I think the way forward is to have, first of all, a zero COVID island of Ireland, and then to make the travel links with other places that are in a similarly good situation. The situation is not under control in our nearest neighbour and one of our most frequent airline destinations. And similarly with the United States, seeing very large upsurges in places that have lifted things too soon. This is a public health emergency, and I very strongly feel that public health concerns have to trump airline worries. So the only safe way is to have a zero COVID Ireland and to try and ensure that we don't import cases. Of course, people can come, but there needs to be satisfactory quarantine arrangements to make sure we're not importing cases.
And that's Dr. Gabriel Kelly, Professor of Public Health at the University of Bristol. He was speaking to Sarah McInerney this morning. Eddie Wilson is the CEO of Ryanair. Good evening.
Good evening, Mary.
I'll get you to respond to Gabriel Kelly shortly, but I want you to set out the plan for us. You're back in the air from next week, a week today. Ryanair back in the skies. What number of flights will you have on? What destinations will you be serving?
Well, we've already started some flights from last Sunday, so we had about 10 departures out of Dublin yesterday, but we'll have about 1,000 flights from next Wednesday, and then that represents about 40% of our normal capacity. But we'll be covering, by reducing some frequencies, we'll cover about 90% of our normal destinations, and then we'll ramp that up in August to about 60%.
What's advance booking like?
Well, you have a booking curve. Without boring you on that, you normally expect people to be booking over a longer period of time. Over the last 3 months, people haven't been booking, but we are very happy with the bookings for July. We would hope to be somewhere in the order of about a 60% load factor. Normally, we would be in excess of 90%. So I think on the basis that there has been no bookings during the sort of lockdown, that's a good place to be, albeit at much, much lower fares.
And at those levels, of course, you're losing money on every flight.
Not in every flight. I mean, it's a function of not just the load factor, but also the fares as well. At this time of year, we've lost money we expect to lose in excess of 200 million in the first quarter. That's from April, May, and June. But we won't have our results out for the second quarter until much later this year. But
below 80% capacity, will you be running flights at a loss? You really need to up your numbers, fill those seats. Again,
yeah. I mean, to get back to normal, we would normally have a load factor in excess of 90%, 94% in some months.
But will you suffer that loss to keep people healthy?
I don't think they are axiomatic at all. I mean, what we have is that if you've looked at our return to service, they have been predicated on the European Union approach to this, which has been, they have restored confidence to flying. They have had a report out since May 20th to get Europe to do everything together. That report is authored by the European Centre of Disease Control and the European Aviation Safety Agency, and they're saying, here's a way for everybody, for all the countries in Europe to jump at the same time, but unfortunately Ireland is the only one that's out of sync with that at the moment.
Well, let's talk about what Dr. Gabriel Kelly was saying, and he made the point that travel brought COVID to Ireland. That was how it arrived here, and that we should be very careful and very cautious after the months that we have been through of reopening quickly, and the restrictions that are there, he would say, are there for a very good reason and need to be strengthened in relation to quarantine rather than being loosened and weakened.
Well, I would agree with some of his comments. I mean, if you listen to the entire clip which wasn't in the piece that you played, was that he said that if he was taking any direction from the Europeans, it would be from the European Centre for Disease Control.
Indeed, he did. He said the European Union isn't a health body.
Yeah, but what he did say was that if he was taking any direction from Europe, it's from the European Centre for Disease Control. That's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what the task force has recommended. If you look in the Code of Practice for Safe Travel, they just, which is the third recommendation from the task force, and they say a code aligning with the ECDC and the EASA protocols. And that's what all we're asking for is there's nothing new here. There's 500 million citizens in the European Union. The European Commission have commissioned this report. It's what everybody else in Europe is doing, and there should really be no reason why Ireland shouldn't align itself with that.
And you're driven by economics, and a lot of jobs are at stake here. But his point about Aerobridges, that we open up Aerobridges to countries which have a similar R rate to our own, he would say makes sound health sense to try and maintain this country, not just at the level we're at, but to become COVID-free.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not a medical expert. I mean, the idea that I think, as he promulgated on the interview today, that we somehow or other could have an air bridge to Scotland and not to the rest of the UK, is just not viable. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. And if you look at the European Union, which we're a member of, where there's free movement throughout that. Flying has been restored throughout Europe under the guidance of the European Commission and the European Centre of Disease Control, and all the task force is saying, why can't Ireland be aligned with that? Get rid of these, because these are platitudes as well, talking about quarantines, that they don't work. They sound good, but they don't work. And we're just asking that we are aligned with the rest of Europe under the best medical and scientific advice.
I don't want to just have an argument about what Gabriel Kelly said versus what you said. I do want to talk to you because you are an aviation expert.
Yeah. And it's not an argument, it's a fact.
He would beg to differ with you and would talk about quarantine needing to be strengthened. But look, let's leave that for now, and let's talk about aviation and how aviation is going to change, because you want to get your numbers back up. You want people to get back flying. How do you give people back the confidence to go through airports? And we heard what the airport experience is going to be like on this station on Monday. We heard about, the face masks going in. You have to go airside. Nobody can come to say goodbye to you, and so on and so forth. You get on your flight and it will be a different experience. It will take much longer to work your way through an airport as you depart and as you arrive in another destination. Why wouldn't you want to go to West Cork rather than Faro in Portugal?
Well, because there's no capacity in West Cork for a start for all the people who actually go on holidays out of Ireland. It would be nice to think that that's the answer to it, but there simply isn't the capacity within Ireland. But leave that aside. Look, there has been many changes in aviation over the last number of years, like post 9/11. And various things where we've had to adapt to that. But the reality here is it's not just about airports. People will be wearing masks where social distancing can't be maintained. You'll see that in Grafton Street and all the shops. You'll see it in shopping centres on the Lewis and the Dart. People increasingly are doing that, and that is the best way to stop the transmission of this in where there are lots of people congregating. And then there are all the other recommendations that have been set out by the European Centre for Disease Control that says, look, don't have people moving around the cabin, don't have cash on board, don't have make sure that the filtration systems are correct on aircraft.
And have you improved your filtration systems on aircraft?
Well, the filtration system was always excellent it's on most modern aircraft where they are at hospital grade because they actually remove particles from those systems.
Because a lot of people would say, and you know this, a lot of people would say they pick up bugs, they pick up flus, they pick up, on aircraft.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mary, they are subjective. I mean, there are lots of reports out there that have said throughout the COVID crisis that they had that in some cases where people were infected coming back on long-haul aircraft, that passengers on the aircraft weren't infected either. I mean, a lot of this is subjective as well. But what I can tell you objectively is that the HEPA filters that are on most modern aircraft, including all of our aircraft, remove particles in excess of 99%. They are hospital-grade extraction systems. And you don't have air recirculating in the cabin the way people tend to think of it. It's actually taken out of the cabin.
You're getting back, you say, to about 40% of what would have been your total capacity. That means that a significant number of Ryanair jobs will not be back anytime soon, does it? Was it 3,000 jobs plus a number of jobs in offices in Dublin and elsewhere have already?
Yeah, we've lost about 250 people in the sort of non-flying areas. But what we've been doing is we've been working with the unions. We've just come to an agreement with the British Airline Pilots Association that's going to ballot between now and next Wednesday. We are currently in talks with the Forza Union here in Ireland, trying to avoid redundancies. And what we're going to do is to have pay reductions. Our proposals are pay reductions, and then to spread the work that is there, so that people. The important thing is to keep people in jobs as best you can.
So what are you saying then? How many jobs will actually be lost?
Well, we have given in Ireland on the pilot side, we have notified the Minister of up to 120 pilot jobs and in excess of, I think, 130 cabin crew jobs. But we're in active negotiations at the moment. They're actually going on as we speak.
And for the others that you will continue to employ, what level of wage reduction are you looking for?
Well, we're looking for 20% for our pilots and 10% for our cabin crew. And we have already got agreement in a number of countries. And as I say, the most prominent of that is with in the UK. And that deal with 20% pay reductions for pilots is going to ballot at the moment.
That's a massive whack.
Well, the important thing here is, as part of this deal, they get pay restoration back over a period of 4 years. So at least people know, look, there are reduced passenger numbers. Here's a way to maximise the amount of people to stay in employment, take a temporary hit on pay with the assurance that you're going to get that pay back over 4 years. I think that's very reasonable.
You have, and maybe I have this figure wrong, you'll correct me, I'm sure if I have, you ended your financial year with 3.8 billion in cash.
Yeah.
Would you not consider using some of that money? You're one of the airlines that could afford to ground your fleet for more than a year and still get back in the skies afterwards. Would you not use that money to maintain your staff and maintain their salary levels?
We are, but while 3.8 billion sounds like a hell of a lot of money, what it does is that you've got to be in business for the long term here. You've got to cut your cloth in the situation that we are, where we have less passengers who are willing to pay us less. We're reducing costs everywhere, and we would hope to be back at some time over the next number of years when traffic comes back and fares come back. So it's not a question of if you were to just rely and keep everything as it was and dip into your cash reserves, it just means that you're going to be out of business in 12 months' time.
But will it come back? Has this pandemic potentially changed air travel? And we also have climate issues and our carbon footprint. Will this be the game changer for overseas travel and for flying?
No, I think the efficient carriers will ultimately survive out of this, and that people will still need to travel. We've been through many challenges before, everything from volcanoes to 9/11 to SARS, and it will come back, and there will be different ways. Yeah.
So how many carriers do you think will go to the wall?
Sorry, Mary, the call was interrupted there. Sorry.
How many carriers do you think will go to the wall?
Well, look around Europe at the moment. I mean, Lufthansa, Air France, Alitalia, they're all looking for government bailouts at the moment, which the private companies can't access. But I think you're going to see some of the smaller ones are going to either be swallowed up by some of the larger carriers, or they're going to go out of business. And to date, you look down through the list, there's over 100,000 jobs in airlines been lost in the last 2 months, or are on their way out. It is truly frightening. 22,000 jobs in Lufthansa, 10,000 in Air France. You've got redundancies in Sun Express from the Lufthansa group went bust yesterday.
A changed landscape.
Unbelievable.
There we must leave it. Eddie Wilson, CEO of Ryanair. Thank you very much.